4, 3, 2, 1. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. This is episode number 2 of the Shift Method podcast. And with me today, I have a really, really awesome guest. I know you are going to be really excited to hear from one of my friends and former colleagues again from Purdue Well, and that is Hannah Thompson. Hannah, say hi to the people and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Damien, so much for having me on here. I'm super excited. Like Damien said, we met at Purdue. He was my big old boss man back then. But I am a dietitian. I work here in Fort Wayne, Indiana at a weight management clinic. I also have my own little virtual private practice called Health with Hannah, where I will see patients virtually, whether in video or on video or over the phone. And I also am a personal trainer, which is how Damien and I met. He oversaw the personal trainers at Purdue. And so I trained at Purdue, and I also trained some virtually, and I also trained at one of the gyms here in Fort Wayne. So got a whole lot of hats on, but
that's right.
Busy.
I think, Hannah, you forgot to mention the most important thing, which is you're an owner of a really good boy, an amazing dog.
That's
Finn
true. He's a good
is
boy.
The man. He's very photogenic. I have to give him credit because I can't take photos to save my damn life. And I see this dog, I'm like, wow, how do I get that status of being able to take photos like that?
Gosh, he's the most handsome boy in the world. I love him so much.
And he loves to interrupt your workouts, which is also great content as well.
Yeah. If I'm on the floor, it's in his territory and it becomes an issue, so he has to become involved. But
yeah, your last video had me cracking up, man. Just like the minor concussion you may have sustained.
I nearly got concussed. Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't know what we're talking about, Hannah, real quick, we'll do this. What's your Instagram so people know where to follow you as well?
Sure. Yeah, I post about myself and my dog at dietitian.hannah. And then my dog also has his own Instagram.
It's awesome. Yeah, definitely worth checking out. She posts a lot of great stuff about, recipes, really good science background, and of course, all things Finn related. So, a couple things that we're going to talk about today is just general what it's like being an RD and what that means. Also, here to bust some diet myths. Part of the friendship that Hannah and I, have grown to have is through a love of making fun of certain things, fitness memes, things like that. But of course, talking about diet. I myself am not a registered dietitian. I've had some coursework in nutrition, but I am by no means a licensed professional like Hannah is here, which we'll talk more about. But it is one area that I do my best to at least stay up with the literature on. And of course, knowing how to refer out and where the scope of practice is for me as a coach. Because while I can't prescribe individualized advice, I know that I need to make sure that I'm at least somewhat competent in where the field is going. And lastly, kind of piggybacking off that, we're also going to talk about the field of nutrition as a whole with some legislation that's been passed, which I know is dying to talk about in my wonderful state of Florida, and kind of just what the relationship is between a RD and a coach and what that should look like. So Hannah, starting with that first point, can you just briefly explain to the audience what an RD is and maybe clear up some of the confusion? We hear the terms thrown around, RD or Mr. Dietitian and nutritionist or dietitian. What are the differences between those words and what is an RD exactly?
Yeah, good question. So RD stands for registered dietitian. There's actually new nomenclature out there, which is RDN, which is what I use. So the academy that oversees all dietitians decided to add that N at the end. Because it stands for nutritionist, and that is more of a common word that, the common person would know. People know what a nutritionist is, but don't usually know what a dietitian is sometimes. So you can go by either RD or RDN. And so to become a dietitian, you have to go through at least 4 years of schooling, get a bachelor's degree. So, for example, I went to Purdue and got my bachelor's degree. I actually double majored and got it in dietetics and nutrition, fitness, and health. I thought it'd be very important to get that exercise side of things since I am a personal trainer as well, and I like how they go so much hand in hand. But anyway, you get your bachelor's degree, and then you have to complete an internship, which is also called supervised practice. And you have to complete 1,200 hours of supervised practice. Yeah. Grueling. Did that last year. It was not fun. It is usually not paid either. So any RDs to be listening.
Now, do you have to pay for that? Do you have to pay like credit hour for that?
Oh yeah, I paid full tuition
pay to work
last
for
year.
free. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's kind of a scam, but it's all worth it in the end. So you complete your internship and then you become verified to take the exam. You take the exam, making sure you study plenty before because it's pretty grueling. And then you're able to practice. You have to, just like a personal trainer, you have to get continuing credits in education to maintain your registration. And one last thing I want to point out is in 2024, actually, you'll be required to have a master's degree to take that dietitian exam. Yep. Thankfully, those of us like me who already have our RD credential are grandfathered in. But again, if anyone's listening who's planning to become a dietitian, make sure you know that in 2024, they'll be required to have a master's degree. So,
yeah. So what I'm getting from that is that it takes a lot, even currently, to become an RD, and it's looking like it's going the trajectory of it's getting more and more difficult to become an RD. And we'll kind of discuss that later on, but it's by no means easy. And like Hannah said, like, it's not just like you sit for an exam, like a CPT, and you're done with it. You have to have a degree and do a year-long internship. So it's more or less 5 years in total. Is that fair to say, Hannah?
Most people, it's at least 5 years, yeah. Some programs, like for example, it's called a coordinated program. So you do it through the same university. You graduate once you finish the internship. But on the other hand, others are called a didactic program. For those, you would complete your bachelor's degree, graduate from that school, and then possibly go to another school to do your internship, which take 1 or 2 years. So anywhere from 4 to 6 years for most people to become a dietitian.
And now my assumption is, if there's like specialties that require more schooling or a longer internship, or how does that work?
Good question. So some schools will actually have you focus during your internship on those specialties. For example, one of my best friends, she's going to Benedictine and she's focusing a lot more on sports nutrition because what she wants to do as a career once she becomes a dietitian. My program was more generalized. You know, you can kind of pick the rotations you want and kind of focus more on certain topics if you want. But again, mine was kind of generalized and didn't really focus on one thing, whereas other universities might focus on specific fields of nutrition.
Gotcha. And yeah, like I said, not an easy program by any means. No, Purdue is a phenomenal program. And a lot of our personal trainers actually was really cool. Like you said, having that dual thread of like, yes, I do know the things when it comes to nutrition and diet, but I also know how to train people. And that is a deadly combination to have. And we had the benefit of a lot of our trainers were following a similar route as you. And I just remember them trying to get into their internship. It is stressful. They are busting their ass, applying to places here and there, all to potentially rotate and travel for a year unpaid, figuring out living expenses. So it is definitely a daunting task, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very good. Thank you for explaining that. So now that we kind of have the understanding of RD in terms of the different acronyms and nomenclature, what would you say is the responsibility or the scope of practice of an RD?
Another good question. Like I kind of touched on a second ago, every single dietitian will have a completely different role. There's so many different fields of nutrition you can go into. Like I said earlier, work in a weight loss clinic, which is what people typically think about when they hear the word dietitian and help you lose weight. But of course, there's way more that you can go into. You can go into renal and help with kidney health. You can go into private practice. You can go into food service management. Someone has to teach dietitians to become dietitians. So you can go into college education, sports, pediatrics, all kinds of stuff. And so it varies person to person, but the scope is, staying within your scope, just like as a personal trainer, making sure you don't go outside of those lines. So if I, for example, didn't have my personal trainer certification, I would not be providing fitness education to my patients and clients. So making sure to stay within those boundaries if you aren't also certified in other things.
Absolutely. The best way, because I used to teach a personal training prep course, which I believe you went through that at one point, right? But before
before you were there. Yeah.
With Tracy.
Good old Tracy. Shout out to Tracy.
Shout out to Tracy out of USF. Yeah, the very small part of nutrition in the curriculum, just getting the basic down, micro and macronutrients, what they are, and big thing, scope of practice. And the best way I try and explain to people is like, as a personal trainer or a coach, you prescribe exercise. That is your scope. As a RD or RDN, your job is to prescribe dietary patterns or dietary behavior modifications. So making that distinction is very important, especially if you're a young aspiring personal trainer. We're going to go a little bit more into detail about what you should and shouldn't do, but just try our best to understand that distinction moving forward. And then you kind of already mentioned that the different specialties you go into, whether it's renal, weight loss, all that stuff. For you being in the weight loss clinic side of things, what does a typical day look like for you?
Good question. So my day job is at a weight loss clinic. So I see patients one-on-one. They're usually referred by their doctor, or they might come on their own if they are just ready to start losing weight without being referred. But these patients come to us. Many of them are severely obese. Weight loss is a good goal for them. And kind of going off of that, I often ask my patients, why do you want to lose weight? Because if it's just
always start with why.
The doctor said you have to, they're not going to want to be there. They're not going to take the right steps in that good direction. So getting to their why is usually the first step. But once we get past that and we do figure out it's a good goal for them, we'll go into the steps of losing weight, which usually involves, caloric restriction, making sure you're getting plenty of fruits and vegetables, lean protein. I'll encourage getting some form of activity, whether it's just going for a walk if it's someone who's very sedentary. And once they start getting their walking on, I'll say maybe start going for walks even longer, or go a little faster, or start incorporating some body weight exercises, whatever it might be. So every single day is different. Every patient is different, but usually just starting with the why and going from there.
Absolutely. Now, in this clinic, since you do have the awesome privilege of being a personal trainer and a registered dietitian, do they also engage in physical activity on site there, or do you prescribe exercise programs like more in detail there with them, or is that kind of a separate thing you do on the side?
More of a separate thing I do on the side. I would love at some point to get that to be a thing there where I could, personal train them and also be their dietitian. That all just comes down to money. It's a giant hospital who's funding a million other things. So maybe someday we can get that going there. But yes, I do train at one of the gyms here in Fort Wayne as well. And then I also train virtually as well, kind of like what you and Elias were saying in the last video. I think virtual training is going to be the next big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Just wonderful. I think it's so good.
Absolutely. Because, pandemic kind of exposed a little bit, but just in general, like it makes your reach very unlimited. And having it as a cheaper option for people who maybe don't have the means to afford, some places charge $100 a session. Well, if I can get it cheaper, maybe I can afford it and still get something that's going to help keep me accountable. So
exactly.
Absolutely. Very, very cool. So now we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about some dietary myths. And this is the stuff that Hannah and I have great time on Instagram all the time. And that's just, going into the weeds with some of the stuff. And one thing I like to preface, and Hannah knows this about me, I'm not the type of person that makes fun of people, right? I think it's important to separate ideas from people, right? So, and it's always good to err on the side of caution of that people are trying to do the right thing, right? I know that I have vast disagreements with program design with a lot of people, but if we can all start from the same place that we have the same goal, right? And that's to help people get healthier. I think that's what opens up conversation. There are, of course, bad actors in any field, and there's bad professionals in every field. There's going to be people who are just doing it for the money, just trying to screw people over and scam them. But know that when we're talking about these ideas, we might be critiquing the ideas, not necessarily if you or someone you know holds these positions. So I think it's always an important distinction to make. But with that being said, let's make fun of these in some respect. So I see this a lot right now in social media, and it makes me very happy that I'm seeing it. This is one of the positive things I'm seeing, and that is kind of the challenge of the term diet, or at least in the way that we might traditionally view diet, right? When I hear diet back in the day, or when I think most of my friends and family talk about it who aren't in our field, it's more so like diet immediately comes with this like baggage of restriction, right? It's something that is, not very fun. It's extraordinarily tough. It's restrictive. It's not really something that meshes well with life. Can you kind of talk about what that term diet means to you?
Yes, absolutely. You basically just summed it up. A diet is, the word itself has a negative connotation because for years and years and years, it's been a bad thing. And if you have to change the way you eat, it's usually for weight loss. But the term diet literally just means the foods that you eat to stay alive or whatever your goal is, which usually staying alive is one of them. But yes, it's literally just the foods that you eat. We're all on some sort of diet. just for fun, yesterday I Googled the word diet to see what would come up. And of course, all the results were geared towards weight loss. Follow this diet to lose weight. Follow this diet to lose weight. Avoid this food to lose weight. And so even in my sessions with my patients and clients, I try to avoid using the word diet because it does have such a negative connotation. I mean, whether we like it or not, that's just the way it is. I will say the words, meal plan, lifestyle, whatever, because the word diet, they hear me say that and they're like, oh, another diet. I don't want to do that. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. It has this negative connotation, whereas it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's literally just the things that we're eating on a regular basis. So,
right. Do you find another word or phrase, like you mentioned, meal planning, or maybe like eating pattern, or do you find a phrase that might be a better replacement or that you find works better when you're talking with your patients?
Yeah. Honestly, it depends on what we're talking about, but usually I'll say the words, we're going to go over this meal plan today. We're going to go over this lifestyle change. We're going to go over these habits today, things like that. If I do say the word diet, it'll be in a way that makes it known that it's not a restrictive weight loss thing. You know what I mean? But yes, any word will do besides diet, because everyone just thinks the word diet is the worst.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very good point. And that kind of leads into the way that we I like that you sent me the article, and I'll make sure to put these in the description below when I post this on YouTube. But I like how the article that you sent me kind of showed the trending of obesity, because yes, weight loss is a very important component that I'm sure is in your field, especially in the United States, how obesity is an issue that we're struggling with heavily. But, I knew it was more so a global issue as well, especially as the world becomes more or less industrialized and people are starting to come out of poverty for the most part. Of course, a lot of areas of the world are still experiencing a lot of hardship, but even in underpowered areas, it seems like obesity in a lot of cases is going up too, with the changing of food or trying to make food more available is having an impact on obesity across the globe. Can you kind of just briefly explain to us where we are in the United States or in the world globally with obesity and what obesity is, maybe for people who don't know what that is exactly?
Yeah, I'll start with that first. So obesity is based on BMI, which could be a whole nother conversation we have. BMI is literally just a ratio of height to weight. But to be considered obese, you would have a BMI greater than 30. And the article that I sent you showed that 1 in 3 adults are obese, and 2 out of 3 adults, so over 50%, are overweight and obese, or obese, I guess you could say. So pretty big problem, something we need to work on. That's why my job is so secure, quite honestly. I mean, there's always going to be people who are obese and overweight and need help. The article also is saying that it's estimated that by 2030, half of men and women will be obese, which I had to walk away from my computer for a minute because that was just crazy. Kind of going back to the BMI thing though, again, BMI isn't everything. Those numbers are based on a BMI greater than 30, but there are plenty of people who have a BMI over 30 who are considered obese, who are very healthy. Bodybuilders, powerlifters, anyone who has a lot of muscle mass, quite truthfully, is going to be considered obese. I think I'm overweight, if not obese, based on BMI, and I consider myself a pretty healthy person. So it's not necessarily the best indicator of success or health, but it's what it is in the healthcare field. It's how we use it to measure people's obesity rates, but it's not always the end-all be-all of success or anything like that. So,
absolutely, and this is something we can talk about BMI for a little bit, because I actually made some notes about that, because it's a good conversation to have in terms of obesity in the United States. The CDC in 2018, and remember, it's important to know that these are surveys, meaning that these are self-reported most of the time. It's getting better over time. We're getting more people. We're trying to get to regions that are harder, and they're even using things like cell phone technology and other ways to get better access to survey information. But at the end of the day, people over-report how tall they are and under-report how much they weigh. So it's safe to assume that these numbers might be even higher. So 42.4% of Americans reported obese, and that's people over the age of 20. BMI is a tricky one because that's usually how these surveys try and assess obesity. When we talk about BMI, a little quick stats lesson for my listeners out there. So BMI, body mass index, right? Ratio of height to weight. There's two primary things that we look for when we're looking for a good test or an assessment. that it's specific, and that it's sensitive. So BMI has really, really high specificity. But there are, like Hannah mentioned, examples where, like me, for example, I fall into the overweight category just because of my height and weight. If you are any kind of, in most athletics, you're probably going to fall into the overweight or obese category, right? You got your 5'10", 220-pound running back. He's going to look at as like morbidly obese. The problem is that it's not very sensitive, meaning that it doesn't pick up a lot of people as well. So chances are, if your BMI, if you don't get picked up in BMI, right? If your BMI is under 30, chances are you're probably going to be okay. But there's going to be people that it doesn't pick up. So what I do with my trainers, I actually also do waist circumference in combination with BMI. Because what that does is that really increases the sensitivity of the test. So I might get a guy who comes in who's 6 foot, 210 pounds, but I do a waist circumference and his waist is like 35. I'm like, okay, dude, like you're fine. And usually you can do a visual test more or less, right? But I'll be like, hey, for shits and giggles, let's just see what your waist looks like. And if that checks out, then I know, okay, even though their BMI is higher than where it should be, quote unquote, I know that most likely their abdominal fat is relatively low, and that's usually a good indicator. So just kind of to tie up some loose ends about BMI right there. Kind of going
off of that too, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Similarly, working in the healthcare field, you mentioned you measure like waist circumference and things. Mm-hmm. When it comes to healthcare, we look at like the comorbidities they might have as well. Hypertension, type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea, hyperlipidemia. Those are also indicators that go along with obesity, besides just BMI. So look at the whole picture instead of just that one little number that could mean almost nothing. So
absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I always try to tell people too is, even if you do have a high BMI or you know that you're considered clinically obese, like the number on the scale does not define your worth as a person. Mm-hmm. I really like the movement. Like, obviously we want to make sure that we aren't like shaming people for their weight. We should always be doing our best to promote, healthy lifestyle, healthy changes, healthy function, whether it's, waist circumference or things like that. But that doesn't mean that because your waist circumference is high that you're less valuable as a person. And I have a lot of clients that I can tell that are in that category or they're trying to work out of that category. Their worth is based on that. So anyone who's listening, if you're working with clients and you find them stuck in there, one, find them a good RD like Hannah. Two is try and have those difficult conversations about like, hey, like you're so much more than a 3-digit number on a scale. Really, you are. Very, very important thing to have with them. Absolutely. With the obesity problem that we're seeing on a global scale, Hannah, you can put this to, across the board, or if you want to focus on the United States, I'll leave that up to you. But what are some of the factors you think that are affecting that? I know it's multifactorial, but what are some things that you can say, like, here's some things we need to address?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, there's many things causing it. Most of the patients I see, it's overeating. Quite simply, they're eating more calories than they should be. And that could be the cause of that is all over the board. And that's why we have a mental health therapist on staff too, where I work, because obesity and weight loss is so much more than just calories in, calories out. Mm-hmm. It's a mind game for most of our patients. Almost at least twice a day, I get someone who starts crying on me just because they've gone through so much trying to lose weight, and they've tried every diet in the book and they just can't do it anymore. And the whole spiel. But another big one is, of course, lack of physical activity, which I'm sure you can attest to this. Mm-hmm. People just don't want to get active, and people think that. If I recommend, hey, why don't you go get a little more active? They think I'm telling them to go for a 5-mile jog, which that's hardly ever the case. I don't even ever want to go for a 5-mile jog. I said this earlier, physical activity, if you're a couch potato right now, can just be going out for a 5-minute walk. That's better than nothing.
Absolutely.
So finding the motivation within yourself, kind of digging deep and just doing whatever it is to kind of get you going. Because that's probably one of the biggest things I'd say is lack of physical activity.
Yeah, 100%. We know that about less than a quarter, and again, self-reported. So people are always going to say that they're doing more than they actually are, because it's hard to take a large group of people and measure their physical activity. Only about a quarter of people meet the minimum guidelines for ACSM. So, and yeah, of course, we have the problem of too much as opposed to too little, like some other countries, unfortunately, where we have an abundance of food. In some circumstances, I should say. I know food deserts are also a problem still, even in the States here. But yeah, definitely lack of physical activity and just eating more than they need to. And that's kind of a funny thing because, I make the joke with a lot of my friends, and it's like, well, yeah, losing weight's simple. It's just eat less and move more. While that is true, if it was that simple, we wouldn't have a problem. I kind of had this combo with Elias. Like, we have some of the best researchers on the planet. We have great medicine. We have great coaching, great universities. Why is the problem getting worse? And if you asked a million people, like, hey, is eating less good for you and is exercising more good for you? I think you get 100% resounding yes. So why don't we do it? It's because changing behavior is difficult. I like to say for personal training, it is more so about changing behavior than anything. There's some things I got to manipulate, but at the end of the day, it's, can you find something you can adhere to long term? Would you say that working as an RD is somewhat similar?
Absolutely. And finding those baby steps. I keep saying this over and over again. I say it over and over again at work too. Mm-hmm. It's just making one little change at a time, which I believe is part of your whole basis of the shift method, right? I mean, taking little things.
Small change over time.
Yeah. Exactly. So for most patients and clients, it's finding the one thing they can do and going from there. Because if you tell them, make this ginormous change tomorrow or you're going to be in big old trouble, they're going to, A, not do it, and also, B, never come see you again because you're going to seem like a crazy, strict person. But you just got to find those little baby steps and take them one day at a time.
Yep. It's being humble, right? It's like, hey, here's where we are. Cool. Can you do this small thing? It's going to be challenging, but we're going to make it so that you can do it. Humble yourself and find a way to get it done. And before you know it, months, years later, you're going to be like, wow, all those little steps, all those little shifts added up to a great big change. So yeah, very, very good way to kind of go over the obesity epidemic. So thank you for that, Hannah. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of when we talk about a little bit more specifically about myths, one that does not seem to go away is this myth about carbohydrates, sugars, and kind of overarching the ketogenic diet.
Yes.
For our listeners, can you just briefly define what a carbohydrate is and what the ketogenic diet is?
So, putting it in simplest of terms, a carbohydrate is one of the three macronutrients along with fat and protein. It's essential. So that's why the keto diet is sort of silly in my eyes. But anyway, carbohydrate is essential. It's used for energy. And the keto diet restricts carbohydrates. That's its whole basis. The goal with the keto diet is to restrict carbohydrates so much that you use a different pathway for energy and you use ketone bodies from fat instead. And that's why you have to eat so much fat on the keto diet. And so you restrict so much carbs that you eat, or that you, use ketone bodies for energy. And the goal is to lose weight, which of course that's going to happen initially if you're cutting out an entire macronutrient. I mean,
wait, so you're saying if I eat less, I'm going to lose weight?
Usually that's how it works for most people, yes. You cut out an entire macronutrient and you're going to lose weight. Now, the problem is it's not sustainable. I mean, like I said a second ago, carbs are essential. You need them for energy. Your brain needs them to function. And the keto diet, most people also don't know this, is it also restricts protein because our body needs carbs so much that it's going to take the protein you eat and turn that into glucose, which is what is used for energy from carbs, and it's going to use the protein for energy instead. So a true ketogenic diet is mainly fat, moderate protein, and hardly any carbohydrates. And most people simply aren't following that, is just kind of the overreaching thing there. Another thing is it takes your body a long time to get into ketosis. And so the minute that you cheat, quote unquote, and you have something with carbohydrates, you're basically undoing all of your quote unquote hard work that you've done to get into ketosis. And so the whole thing is just a cycle of, restricting and overeating, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. And like I said a second ago, your body wants carbs so bad that it works super duper hard to function optimally when you don't have them. And that's why you get that keto flu that everyone talks about when you do go through the keto diet. So yes, if you can't tell, I'm not very happy with the keto diet. I have to explain this at least once a day because it's just all over the place. People who don't know any better, which we said this before we even got into this, that we're not making fun of anyone who's doing this because they don't really know any better. People are just promoting it and saying how great it is, and everyone's like, oh, sweet, yeah, an easy weight loss solution, let's do that. And before they hear from a dietitian or any other health professional, they think it's the right thing to do, and then it usually ends up failing long term.
Absolutely. And you sent me the article that I think really, really explained in a really concise manner what the ketogenic diet is and like the pros and cons. And it looked like the author was taking a really good approach where it's like, it can work for some people. It is a strategy, right? I have family members, just speaking anecdotally purely here, I have family members who've done it. I have a family member who just finally reached, she lost 100 and some pounds in like the last couple of years. And it's been crazy because that has worked so well for her. She loves it. She adheres to it and it's going well for her. Awesome.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can use your anecdotal evidence to say, this is the one true way that everyone must do to lose weight. It is a strategy. It also, like Hannah mentioned, and this is a really important point, and Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but more so I'm seeing in the literature that protein is being used as a really good macronutrient for helping with weight loss. Meaning because protein is so high in satiety, and as you begin maybe participating in resistance training, increasing your protein intake is a really good strategy to help with weight loss. But because, like you said, through gluconeogenesis, where the protein I'm eating can be converted into carbohydrate for fuel because my body's like, homie, where's all the carbs at? Help me out. It's going to go to the protein instead. So that's kind of another factor to consider. I've read that it's like it can help with certain forms of pediatric epilepsy, that's child seizures. But outside of those really rare circumstances, and unless you find it that you can adhere to it, there's nothing really uniquely beneficial about the ketogenic diet, right? It's more so just a calorie gain.
Exactly. Yeah. It was initially created, like you just said, for pediatric epilepsy to help treat that. And so how it became a weight loss solution, I have no idea. But just like every other fad, someone tries it, they promote it, and then it becomes this big deal. And the only reason it does work is because of calorie restriction. So don't know how it became this big of a thing, but here we are.
And I think carbohydrates and sugar in general, because carbohydrates and sugars, I think it gets a bad rap because typically foods that are high in carbohydrate are high in calories. And also, I'm blanking the term right now, but they're very desirable foods, right? You have a really sugary beverage that is high in carbohydrate, like a Coke, and it doesn't make you feel full and it makes you want more. So it has this like pseudo addictive quality to them, kind of like how some fast food does, right? So I think carbs kind of get a bad, and sugar in general gets a bad knack for that. It's like, well, if I cut out the sugar or an entire macronutrient, I lose weight. And then because if you do that, a positive result happens, people automatically go, see, I was right. Cut out the sugar, cut out the carb, and the weight is gone. Can you kind of clear up the air, Hannah, in terms of like sugar by itself? Is it necessarily a bad thing to consume sugar, or what happens if I eat too much? Can you kind of just lay that out for us?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, I want you eating a well-balanced diet, full of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things like that. But sugar is not the devil. It's not the cause of weight gain. It's not really as addictive as everyone says it is. And truthfully, if you do feel like you are addicted to sugar, it's probably because you've been restricting it for so long. If you spent most of your life avoiding it because you think it's quote unquote bad, your mind wants it so badly that it becomes obsessive the minute you get some. And so that's kind of where the addictive title comes from, because you want it so badly after not having it for a long time. But no, sugar's not the devil. It's not the end all be all of weight loss. You can absolutely have a soda on occasion and lose weight as well. Now, that being said, of course, you should choose mostly, your complex carbs, things that will provide fiber and B vitamins. If you're getting carbs from dairy, that'll give you some calcium, vitamin D, good for your bones, things like that. But there's no good food, no bad food. Food has no moral value. You can absolutely eat sugar and still be healthy. So I hope that sums that up.
Absolutely concise and to the point. I love it. So if you're hearing this, it is okay to have a soda. Remember, it's things in moderation, right? Mm-hmm. If you're able to, eat in calories that support your goal while also enjoying a little bit of food here and there, then you're going to go the right direction. So take it from the RD herself. And that kind of goes into like the next topping point, which is this kind of thing. And I've loved the term. I've never heard the term before, but I'm glad I know it now. And is it chemophobia? Is the term?
Yes, I love that.
I love that term. I've never even heard that before, but it makes complete sense. So, Anna, can you just briefly describe what this term chemophobia means and how it kind of goes into the broader picture of our perception of chemicals in food?
Yes. So chemophobia, it's in the name. It's just the fear of chemicals. People say, I don't eat food that has chemicals in it. But I sent you that picture of the banana with all of the ingredients in it. And for those of you who obviously can't see it, maybe we can share it in the show notes so everyone can click on the link and look it up. But it's a picture of a banana, and then it has all the ingredients, which you would think would be a banana, right? But it has all the chemical listings of the components of a banana, all the amino acids, all of the chemicals that make up the color of the banana, things like that, things that you can't pronounce. So that rule where if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it is bogus. Don't follow that. And if you don't know what an ingredient is and you truly are worried about it, talk to a dietitian. Don't just Google it, because there will be conspiracy theorists all over saying if you eat that, you'll get brain cancer or something. So
wait, so you're saying red dye 40 does not cause autism?
That I actually have not read up too much on that. I should. When it comes to all these chemicals, though, Damien, the dose is the poison. So even for things like artificial sweeteners or preservatives, things like that. Sure, if you were to drink a ton of diet soda and you had so much aspartame that your body couldn't handle anymore, you probably would get sick. But no one is consuming that much of any of these foods that a problem's going to arise.
Absolutely. And it's funny, that's one of my favorite quotes, right? Is the poison is in the dose, right?
Mm-hmm. Just
kind of give y'all one example. Almonds have trace amounts of cyanide in them. Right? So for those who don't know what cyanide is, it's a chemical that can kill you if ingested in large enough quantities, right? Any food has chemicals in it or even taking minerals and vitamins, for example, you can have toxicity of these certain things if you have them in extraordinarily overwhelming amounts. But like Hannah said, the poison is in the dose. So just because you can't read a label or it doesn't make sense to you, or you hear that there's like some substrate or some variation of a metal, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad for you. And I love when you had the banana. I'll be sure to put that in the comments down below. Yeah, like I'm reading through and like I recognize most of the terms, but then like when it gets to the coloring and it starts like oh crap. Yeah. To kind of even bring even further home, like if I said I'm going to butcher this up, but here we go. I'm having 1,3,7 trimethyl purinate U6-dionine. That's caffeine. So if you heard me say that and you're like, dude, like what kind of acid chemical are you trying to kill yourself with?
Be careful.
That's me having a cup of coffee. So that's just to kind of, if we haven't already, beat this idea into y'all's heads, that's kind of just to further drive the point home. Am I missing anything else that you want to say on chemicals in food, Hannah?
Oh, I don't think so. The clean eating term, same thing with that. Clean eating, like is there just not any dirt on your food? If so, that's good. But clean eating is not a regulated term. It doesn't mean that your food has better or worse chemicals in it. That's the only one other thing I want to say about that is clean eating is also one of those terms that just pretty much means nothing.
Wash your fruits and vegetables, kids. That's it.
Yep.
That's it. All right. So now that we've kind of gotten some of the myths out of the way, let's kind of discuss some strategies that either you would work in the clinic or maybe some general advice you can give to our listeners at home in terms of what they can do for weight loss. So let's say if someone who comes in, they're doing their best to lose weight, they're seeking your guidance as a professional. What are some tips or strategies that you can use to help people lose weight?
Yeah, I said this earlier, the first step is to get the why out of the way, figure out why they want to lose weight, what's their motivation, is it even a good, healthy, realistic goal for them? I mean, I don't have this problem at where I work because we truly do have many overly obese people, but in my own private practice, if someone wants to lose weight and I don't think they necessarily need to do that to be healthy, we might talk about other goals for them. But if weight loss truly is a good, appropriate goal for you, calorie restriction, more exercise, those are usually two go-to things. And that'll look different for every single person. like I kind of got to earlier, if someone is drinking 6 sodas a day, which is not an exaggeration, I see that quite often. People will drink just soda instead of water all day long. For those patients, I say, how do you feel about switching to a diet soda or going down to like 2 or 3 sodas a day instead of 6? And usually those things on their own will help with some additional weight loss. And I'll see them again and again and again. The goal is to not see these patients one time, it's to see them over and over again. So as they start drinking more water, drinking less soda, we can work on the next goal, which would be going out for a walk instead of being sedentary all day. And once they start getting really good at that and their weight is still, going down, we could talk about, using a food diary if they would think that'd be a good fit for them. Getting different kinds of exercise, whatever it is. But it's all about just those baby steps. And of course, the biggest thing is going to be decreasing your calories, increasing your exercise. And it's just the way that looks is going to be different for every single person.
Absolutely. And I like that. You took the 2 overarching themes, which is decreasing caloric intake and increasing exercise, but you don't just leave it that simple. And this is, I think, another reason why Hannah and I are good friends online, is that you make it a conversation with your patients, right? It's not like, here's what you're doing, do it, or you add 5 or 6 things. It's like, here is what we can do. Here are some strategies. What are you willing to do, right? And that's awesome, because we talk a lot in personal training. If the person doesn't want to make the change or doesn't agree with the process or believe they can accomplish the process, the chances of them actually doing it are slim to none. It's very rare you get the person who prefers the drill sergeant who just tells them what to do. And even if they hate it, they just shut up and do it. That's very, very rare and not productive. We have to figure out, here's where you are. Here's where you want to go. Here's what I recommend. Now let's talk and discuss, is it doing 1 less can of soda a day for a week? Is it doing half a can less a week, right? Where is that area that's going to challenge the person, but that they are actually willing to say, yes, I can do that. I'm willing to negotiate and do that with you. So I really like how you broke that down for us, Hannah. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit, and this is probably going to be a really fun part for you, and that's talking about nutrition standards and kind of the field of nutrition as a whole. So the beautiful sunshine state, if I could speak, that I live in, I love Florida, but it's not perfect. I can make fun of it. I can admit that. We passed some legislation back on June 30th. The title of the legislation is Occupational Freedom and Opportunity Act. I'm not a politician, and when I was reading a little bit about the bill, it looks like it applies to several things, but somehow it's involved with CrossFit boxes in Florida now being able to prescribe prescribe diet patterns for people. And my understanding of it, I'm more than welcome to be corrected. Maybe Hannah has a little more insight than I do. When I go on the website and I dig a little bit deeper on CrossFit, it seems like they're actually talking about programming or prescribing exactly what to eat in terms of these type of foods, this amount of this food, not general recommendations like, hey, try and get more fruits and veggies or more lean protein. Am I right in saying that, Hannah?
Yes, it's absolutely appropriate for a CrossFit trainer or personal trainer to say, eat more fruits and vegetables, get some carbs before you work out, get some protein afterwards. That's just fine. What is happening, though, in good old state of Florida is those CrossFit trainers are now allowed to make meal plans, provide nutritional therapy, which is a dietitian's main job, to their clients, which, not to be dramatic, but it's kind of a slap in the face to us dietitians. I truly don't know a lot about CrossFit. I don't know how long it takes to become a CrossFit coach, but I'm assuming it's a lot less work, education, hands-on experience than it is to become a dietitian. And just let me sit back up. You can be a CrossFit coach and give wonderful nutrition advice, but should you? Just like there are dietitians out there who also shouldn't be discussing certain topics. Like I, for example, wouldn't want to get on your podcast and talk about renal disease because I pretty much just know the basics about it, not too much. And I wouldn't want to be providing that information to people who are listening, or even to my patients in person. I wouldn't talk to them about renal disease. I would refer them out to someone who is specializing in that. And so just the fact that they are doing that sort of not ideal. Hopefully it doesn't catch on in every other state. I actually don't know a lot about CrossFit. Do you know how long, Damien, it does take to become a CrossFit coach?
I do not, unfortunately. I don't know the accreditation level. But it's a tricky one, because a big thing I preach is eliminating as many barriers as possible for people to be physically active and to have access to education and things like that. However, I do not conflate that with professional accreditation. Here's the thing, right? I'm NASM certified, right? All you need for that cert is a high school diploma. That to me is absurd. I'm sorry. It waters down, and I'm not trying to say this to be snobby or elitist or whatever, but I want the people who are in my profession to be the top of the top. I want them to be deadly. I want them to be sharp. I want them to be as competent as hell, so that way we can challenge each other and provide the best information. Now, that's not to say that, and this goes for any profession, I guarantee you there are people who do not have a personal training cert that could program circles around me. There's going to be someone out there, right? And I take a lot of pride in my program design. I'm one of the best program designers you're going to find, right? I'll be humble brag about that, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But there's someone out there who doesn't have a cert who can program just as good, if not better than me. Mm-hmm. But if I had to take the collection of people who are certified versus the collection of people who aren't certified in any domain and trying to say that they're professionals, I'm going to err on the side of the people who actually have the accreditation. Because especially not necessarily for personal training as much, but for Hannah's example, she has a degree. She had to sit for coursework and internship for 5 years before she could even, I'm being facetious here, but saying, hey, you can eat this much chicken. Like, that is the amount of work that this woman has to put in order to even have that privilege to do so. Now, with CrossFit, I don't think the people who are doing this are doing it, with malintent. There might be some bad figures, like I mentioned, just in the field. But it is a bit of a smack in the face, because now this accreditation is less valuable. If everyone, that's kind of the definition of something valuable. If everyone who has a high school diploma can be a certified personal trainer, the value goes down. I say time and time again, honestly, if I had to say, I would make personal training a licensure. I'd say you have to, maybe not a degree necessarily, like, there's the CSCS that you can take, and that's a little bit more of a higher accreditation, but maybe make it like a year-long course or a 6-month course that has like licensure, and maybe even insurance could be billed so it can reach more people. Like, that to me, I'd be like, yes, more for it. I feel like legislation like this waters down her field, and it makes it less valuable. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Totally agree with that one.
So yeah, a little bit frustrating. In terms of, and here's the other tricky part so I've talked to you a little about this, because nutrition is one of the topics I really do enjoy, but because it is a hard process, especially now with COVID, and in 4 years, it's going to be, if I can't get in, it's going to be, well, now you have to have a master's degree and have to make it the coursework. There's a lot of moving parts. Yeah. But it looks like from state to state, there's, as evidenced by this legislation, there's different parameters as to what you can and can't do without a license. Is that fair to say, Hannah?
Yeah, absolutely. In some states, you would get in big trouble for providing what's called medical nutrition therapy. But in other states, anyone and their brother can make a meal plan for someone. So it's not consistent, and that makes it hard to kind of single us out as dietitians and make it so people know who we are and know that we're the one they should be going to, because in some places you can go to anyone and ask for this kind of information and they can give it to you. So there's an academy who oversees all of us dietitians, and there's people in the works trying to make this become more of a whole cohesive process. I've kind of made it a goal for myself now that I am a dietitian to become more into advocacy and work on kind of furthering the profession. Truthfully, in the past, I just haven't as much since I was just an intern, but now that I'm a dietitian and I fully stand behind my profession, I plan to advocate more and make it so that it is more cohesive, kind of everyone's under the same page.
That is awesome. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here.
Oh, gosh.
Hannah, you're in charge of all things RD-based for the country. You're given a magic wand and a blank check. What do you do to kind of bring the country together in kind of this united front to make the country healthier and to help with the legislation imbalances that we're seeing.
Well, I think by just addressing the legislation by itself, it would help because it would put dietitians in the role that they should be and kind of kicking everyone else out, which again, not to be facetious, like you were saying, there are plenty of people who can provide nutrition advice who are good at it, better than me, who didn't go to school for it. But the goal would be to make it so that dietitians are the one providing nutrition advice. I don't quite know, honestly, how that would look in terms of like government and politics and all that fun stuff, because that stuff is not my scope of practice at all. But yes, that would be the goal, making it somehow in some way so that dietitians would be the one people are going to for all nutrition advice. Everyone would know who we are, what we do, that we're more than just people who tell you what to eat, what not to eat. We do a whole lot more than that.
Absolutely. And kind of going on the last topic I want to talk about, right? So again, you have the awesome privilege of being a personal trainer and registered dietitian, right? With personal trainers, the advice usually is refer. But I do my best to try and make clear lines so that trainers know that, hey, nutrition's an extraordinarily important component, and it's important you are competent and know what you should be able to say and what you should be able to do. Obviously, like we said, from state to state, it's going to be slightly different. But from your understanding as both a coach and as a registered dietitian, what is the scope of practice that a personal trainer can generally engage in when discussing nutrition with their client?
Yes, and it's such a gray line. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to define it. And I'm sure you can attest more to that. But just making sure you're not telling someone specific. Like I said earlier, the word medical nutrition therapy is something that only dietitians should be providing. And so that's when you get into specifics and you prescribe certain diets and things like that. For example, go back to the keto diet thing. I don't know how a trainer would be working with a child that has epilepsy, but it'd be very out of scope of practice for a personal trainer to provide a keto diet for a child with epilepsy.
Right.
And so it's just every trainer I've met, quite honestly, has been just fine. Like at Purdue, everyone was so good about staying in their lane. I would overhear conversations with other trainers in their room, talking to their clients, and they would give general information, maybe eat a little more carbs before you work out, protein after you work out, drink more water, things like that. And those are totally appropriate things to talk about with clients as a trainer. And I also think it's really important for trainers to know how to refer as well. And that's another reason why it's so hard that being a trainer only requires a high school degree, because what 18-year-old out of high school who's now a personal trainer knows what to do if their client is like, I want to talk to a dietitian? They're not going to know who to refer to.
I didn't know shit when I was 18.
Yeah, exactly. Even when I first started out, before I was a dietitian, I wouldn't have known what to do if my patient wanted to talk to a dietitian. So, like I said, everyone I've met in my personal life has been wonderful, but I'm sure there are PTs out there crossing that line. And it's so great and hard to look at. And that goes back to if I was the queen dietitian over everyone, I would make that a thing too. Defining that line specifically, maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. The thing that I mentioned with the ACE prep course when I work with students, I tell them, just don't prescribe, right? Yeah. So I usually, when I work with clients and I teach these young trainers, it's like, you can educate, right? Education is a big thing. It's like, what is a carbohydrate? What is the general recommendation of the amount you should be consuming for this various goal, right? Not telling them they should, or that you have to eat these specific carbohydrates in this amount, or saying like, hey, like you're trying to, your goal is hypertrophy training, you're trying to gain muscle mass, right? The recommendation for protein intake is this. I'm not saying you got to do this. You have to eat this much chicken breast at this time. I'm staying away from prescription. I'm just providing education. Another one that I like to use is like, there's references like myplate.gov is one you hear a lot. I like the NIH calculator, especially for my clients who are trying to lose weight. I'll say, hey, go online, use this calculator on your own time, see what number comes up based on your height, weight, activity level, body fat estimates, and it will give you a rough estimate of what you should aim for. And if I wanted to take it a step further, I'll say, hey, you can use apps to track as well if that helps keep you accountable. And you can send me screenshots of your app if that helps as accountability measure. I never go into their personal stuff and say, hey, you should have only this much carbohydrate. You need to be eating this much protein by eating these many foods. I more so use it as an accountability measure. Would you say that's something that personal trainers could do and maybe even should do if they're trying to help out their clients?
Yes, I love that you do that. That's wonderful. I love how you say, just don't prescribe. You can educate all day long, but don't say you have to do it. This is a diet order, a prescription, because that's just way out of line, but that's perfect. You can absolutely educate all day long.
Absolutely. So remember, kids, if you didn't get that big take home, educate, do not prescribe. And I think that's a great place to end.
I think so too.
Episode 2 for today. And I just want to say thank you again so much. This was awesome. Really, really fun conversation. I think people are going to really, really enjoy it. You just go ahead, let everyone know where they can find you, get all the plugs in there.
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. It's probably where I'm the most active at dietitian.hannah. I have a Facebook page. Not very exciting. Don't post on there very often. Maybe I'll work on that. I do have a website, helpwithhannaht.com, or you can email me anytime you have questions or want to work with me at helpwithhannaht@gmail.com.
And remember, if you could care less about nutrition or anything like that, she does have a dog. These are important things that you need to see.
He's cute as heck. So if you don't want to talk about food or exercise, just come for Finn.
Absolutely. And a reminder, if you're looking for me, that is the_shift_method on Instagram. You can head over to my website at theshiftmethod.org. That's all one word. We got t-shirts out. We got masks out. We got blogs out. This will be going up Wednesday. We're recording. It's Monday. So blog post number 2 will be up about pain and perceptions. So go ahead and check that out. That is theshiftmethod.org and the_shift_method on Instagram. And thank you so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Damien.